Crusaders podcast live radio show. I am Patty Reese, and I'm here with my co-host Jessica Endicott. We're excited to talk about mental health nutrition today. Some heavy ones, some anxiety, depression, suicide prevention, brain injury. But we hope this is a positive. Well, we know this is going to be positive because we're going to be giving you some positive solutions to it. So our mission is to educate and empower you to make informed choices for your health, the health of our children, our communities, and our earth. We are committed to fostering a world where the balance between human health and environmental stewardship is respected and nurtured. Join us in this holistic and transformative journey as we work together to create a healthier, more harmonious world for all. Please join the crusade.
Woo-hoo.
Welcome again, everyone. Woohoo! As I can stumble over some of my words, but that's all good. Hey, Jess.
Hey, and I'm going to hurry and read the disclaimer so we can get that out of the way and move forward. Okay,
good.
So the listeners understand that the role of the health coach is not to prescribe or provide healthcare or medical advice or to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases, condition, or physical or mental ailments of the human body. We're not acting in the capacity of a doctor, licensed dietitian, psychologist, or other licensed or registered professional, and that any advice given by us is not meant to take the place of advice by these professionals. If you are under the care of a healthcare professional or currently using prescription medications, please discuss these with your doctor. And do not discontinue your prescription medications without consulting with your doctor. Also, the listener understands that the information mentioned in our talks should not be seen as medical or nursing advice and is not meant to take the place of your licensed practitioner. So that is out of the way.
Okay.
We can get down to the nitty-gritty.
We sure can.
And then I also want to mention at the end, so Patty and I are going to be talking for about an hour, and then we will open up for Q&As where you can call in and ask us questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the number will be posted on here when we get there. So please write down any questions you have as we go along. If there's something that pops out to you, we want to hear from you and we want to support you and hopefully give you leads to a path that will support you or a loved one. Yep. So we're gonna dig into mental health, nutrition, and also look at addiction as well too. So I think we'd love to start a little bit telling you about our story and how we got here, because I think as many folks know, when we experience something, it changes us. And luckily for my case and Jess's case, it changed us for the better and transformed my life. So I think, well, Jess, why don't we start with you? Why don't we start with your experience?
Wow.
Yes. And why don't you start and tell us how you got here? How did you find nutrition and health? Tell us a little bit about your experience and your true story.
My true story. There might be some tears. There might be some tears, so grab your tissues.
Yes, I already did that this morning, so.
I didn't grab mine, but I have a sock right here, so I can
I'm just going to use my scarf.
Oh, I have my blanket too.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Where to begin? Wow. I mean, all my life, I've kind of had this innate intelligence that our bodies were capable of healing, right? I grew up in a home that was incredibly toxic. My father was not a very kind person. And now that I understand why, because I understand addiction, my father was an alcoholic. And at the age of 59, he lost his life to his alcoholism. I, in my teenage years, dabbled with substances. I dabbled with marijuana. I loved smoking weed.
Me too.
I loved it. Like I absolutely loved it. Smoked it all day long. And then, I started tinkering with some of the heavier drugs. I tried cocaine, did meth, was doing acid, doing shrooms, drinking whiskey. And of course, I was stealing this from my dad, right? I was stealing money from my dad so that I could support my drug habits too. I got married at a young age, got pregnant at a young age, and thank God I did, because I got pregnant at the age of 17. And had I not gotten pregnant, I wouldn't have gotten off of my drugs. I remember when I found out I was pregnant, and I have a son, but when I found out I was pregnant, I was smoking a cigarette. And I remember like looking at that cigarette and going, what am I doing? My baby's smoking this right now. And I was in a car and I just threw it out the window, and that was that, right? But I didn't want my children to grow up in that environment. It was so important to me that they didn't grow up in that environment. But my husband ended up with an opiate addiction because he had a hernia operation and dental work, and they were back to back. And so the dentist and the doctor were prescribing medications and opiates. They were prescribing opiates, Percocets and Loratab. And he ended up getting addicted to them because nobody educated us back then. You know, it was, here's a pill, you're in pain, take this pill. Well, we didn't realize the addictive qualities of it. And he had addiction in his genes. I have addiction in my genes. And he became addicted to opiates. My sweet, loving, kind, amazing husband, who we had a hardwood flooring business that was incredibly successful. We did $1.3 million in the first couple of years that we were in business. All the neighborhood kids loved us. Our house was the hangout house. We had a skateboard park in our front yard. You know, it was, our home was a beautiful, loving home. And my husband got addicted to opiates. And when he got addicted to opiates, he was in recovery for 6 years. 6 years. 6 years in recovery. But they did switch him. You know, he went from his addiction to Suboxone. And in fact...
Suboxone.
The Suboxone, because Suboxone is an opiate antagonist, right? But the place that we went to, they said, he will only be on these for 6 months to a year while we give him the coping skills that he needs. Well, then the doctor and the psychologist split. And because Charles was addicted now to the Suboxone, he was dependent upon the Suboxone, we had to follow the medical doctor. And the medical doctor kept upping the dose and increasing the Suboxone instead of weaning him off as we were promised. Right. So Charles and I decided not to do that anymore. Like he did not want to do that anymore. And he wanted to make the jump by himself. And so there were many times that I was calling the doctor and saying, please, please, please help my husband. Like he's now abusing this. Charles started abusing Suboxone. He started abusing it. It was no longer helping him. It was now a new drug for him. And don't get me wrong, like there is a time and there is a place for medical assisted treatment. Right? Absolutely, there is. But he was abusing it and his doctor didn't care. And in fact, this doctor on November 1st, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 2022, was in the news. And November 1st happens to be Charles's birthday, by the way. But he was convicted of prescribing medications, narcotics, and he lost his license. But that's a whole other story, right? So let's.
Well, yeah, that's another trail.
But going back to this, so Charles and I were going through recovery. We're helping him wean off of his medications, and August 17th of 2011. Charles said to me, he goes, Jess, you have no idea the struggles that I have with this. He said, I was so afraid to take that last jump off because the opiates have such a strong hold on me. He said, I'm going to die. I'm afraid for my life. I was like, it's okay, babe. It's okay. We'll get through this together. Fast forward to February 5th of 2012, and Charles didn't come home. He didn't come home because he had relapsed. And I was on the phone with him. I was like, babe, please come home. Come home. Come home. We can work this out. Come home. Come home. And he didn't come home. And it was in that moment that I fell to the ground and I collapsed. And I collapsed in so much pain and so much agony. Because everything that I'd fought for was now becoming my reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I fell to the ground and I was screaming and crying, and my kids come running in and they're like, what's wrong, Mom? What's wrong, Mom? And I had to make the decision to tell Charles he couldn't come home because he didn't come home after a week. He didn't come home. He was out, lost in his land of drugs. And he turned into a monster. Like his drugs turned him into a monster.
Well, it turned his brain, since we're talking about the brain, right? We'll get into that, but it turned his brain into a monster.
My beautiful, sweet, loving, gentle husband who never got mad at anything was now this person I had no idea who he was. He was in 6 car accidents. He was pulling money out of our account, just crazy, crazy amounts of money. And I lost my promotion at JetBlue. I was a lead and I lost my promotion.
Of course.
And I had to quit JetBlue and take a new job. And the night I had gotten my promotion on this brand new job, I was in a car accident.
Oh.
So this was all in 2012. So February and then October, I was in a car accident. Also, that same year, my daughter had severely destroyed her nose in a gymnastics event.
Consecutive traumas.
Yeah, so it was trauma. But during that time of losing my spouse too, his addiction, he wasn't gone yet, right? He was physically here, but mentally he was gone.
Yeah.
I could barely function. I could barely get up out of bed. Depression hit me so hard. This trauma hit me so hard. My life, more than half of my life, we'd been together.
Yeah.
So the life that I knew now was no longer there, right?
Yeah.
It was not existent. It was completely torn apart. My family was torn apart, my beautiful family.
Yeah.
And I remember like having to tell myself, Jessica, you can do this. You've got to get out of bed. You've got to get out of bed. Your kids need you. You have to get out of bed. You have to get out of bed. You have to get out of bed. And I'd lay on my back and bring one foot to the edge of the bed and put that foot down on the ground and then like slowly pry myself up out of bed and get up. And I'd have to listen to Kelly Clarkson's song, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger, you know? And
I don't think I know that song.
Every day I had to listen to it. Every day it was get up, get up, get up, get up. You've got to do this. Get up, get up. Your kids can't lose you too. Get up, get up, get up. And then when I had my car accident and suffered a brain injury and physical injuries, and I went back to work on Monday, barely able to hobble in. My accident was on a Friday, October 12th. 2012, and I was barely able to hobble in to work. And I get into work and I start having this blackout spell, like everything around me was blacking out and I couldn't see. So I call my mom and she rushes me to the ER and they're like, you have a concussion, a brain injury, you can't work. I'm like, how do I do this? My husband is off doing drugs. He's off doing drugs. He's not giving me child support. He's not helping pay the bills. It's all me. I have 2 kids. How can I not work? Like, how can I not work? And I have all these physical injuries.
Right.
And I remember going home that night and laying on my floor and crying and saying, I can't do this. Like,
Yeah.
how do I do this? How do I do this? And I knew I had to do it soberly. I knew that, like, no matter what I did, I had to do it sober because my kids couldn't lose me in addition to losing their father, right? So I'm going through this. I start going to physical therapy. I start going to yoga. I start just throwing myself into whatever healing modalities I can. And thank God my beautiful physical therapist was so amazing, and she could understand emotions and energy work and started doing this stuff on me. And then I start going to yoga, and I learn about amino acid. Oh, wait, before all this, Charles,
Yeah, we're gonna talk about aminos for sure tonight.
before all that, Charles ends up in the hospital because his mom found him 30 minutes before he was dead. So he ends up in the hospital now, May of 2013, on life support. So I have to take my kids to see their father on life support while I have this brain injury, while I'm dealing with my own physical ailments, right? Physical injuries, and still, like, trying to make sense of all this trauma from the previous year, still trying to deal with all this compounded trauma, right? Complex trauma, and not even knowing how to shift through it, and having a brain injury. And I was going to a brain doctor, and she's like, I can't even believe everything that you're going through. I've never seen this in another person. Like, I've never seen this amount of trauma in somebody. Charles gets out of the hospital. He's clean. He's good. He's going to recovery again. And I'm thinking, my kids are going to have their dad back. Like, they're going to have their dad back. This is good. This is really good. My daughter's birthday comes around in October, and we go pick him up. And he gets in the car, and I'm like, I said, Charles, I said, you're high. It's like I was smoking cigarettes, Jess. I was just smoking cigarettes. You always think that when I smoke cigarettes that I'm high. So that was October 6th of 2013. On November 25th of 2013, Charles died. He died because he turned back to heroin because he couldn't beat it. But having to look at your kids and tell them your dad is gone. He didn't make it this time, you guys. He didn't make it. It's something a parent should never, ever have to say. Never, ever, ever have to say to their kids. So here I am, still dealing with my brain injury. Still trying to recover my body. And dealing with the loss of my spouse. The loss of my partner that I was with for more than half my life. And my sister said, Jessica, come with me to hot yoga. Come with me to hot yoga. I was like, why would I do that? I'm already so tortured right now. Why would I do something that's going to torture me even more? Like, hot yoga sounds
I don't like hot yoga just either.
It sounds so horrible, right? It's so horrible. And I get in there, and she's like, just look at yourself in the mirror. Just pay attention to yourself in the mirror and just stare at yourself and, like, see that you can do hard things. So I stare at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, you've got this. Like, you can do this. You can do this. And then I come across a beautiful, amazing teacher named Mark Linton. And he said, Jess, I had a brain injury too. Let me do an amino assessment on you. And I was like, okay, what have I got to lose? Like, well, I've already lost so much. I've lost my home. I've lost my husband. I've lost so much. I've lost my business. I've lost. What else do I have to lose?
Right.
So Mark does an assessment on me, and he's like, you are low in your catecholamines And he said, and your endorphins.
Oh yeah. Well, that's trauma endorphins.
Right. So he gives me these supplements and he's like, within 20 minutes, Jess, you're going to notice a difference. I'm like, bull crap. Like, right. Yeah. And within 20 minutes, my depression was starting to lift. My brain was starting to clear. I was starting to think clearly for the first time in a while, in a few years. Yeah. This was actually like 2014, 15-ish that I had met Mark. So he's like, I'll meet you at Sherlin's, the health food store, and I'll take you and I'll show you what supplements we need to get for you. So go in there and I buy these supplements and I start taking them. And I continue with my yoga. And then before long, I'm like, I need to give back. Like, this is healing. This is so healing for me. So I jump into yoga teacher training, and not just any yoga teacher training. No, I have to
solutions now. Now you're in the solutions.
Yeah, I'm in the solutions. And I'm like, I'm not just going to be a yoga teacher. I'm going to be a yoga therapist. Why would I only get 200 hours certified? I'm going to go for 1,000 hours. And during that 1,000 hours, right, I started healing. I started healing more.
I want to interject. I mean, I want you to continue sharing the solutions, but first of all, I honor you for sharing that, because this is our experience. These are our stories that change our lives. And for all that you've been through. And I know a lot of our listeners have been through a lot of stuff too. And that's part of why we're here. But I wanted to just add before you continue that the yoga and also the amino acid therapy, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. And we're actually going to do another whole show on amino acids too, probably more than one, but on nutrient therapy, gave you that bridge to see the light. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today too, is that we need the bridge for our brain to see the light, right? For us to go, oh, wait, there is hope. And when the brain is fed with aminos and food and yoga and therapy, we'll talk more about that, then the light starts going on. But if the brain is not fed, the fact that Mark, we'll just leave his first name, helps you. And I just wanted to let our listeners know that Mark came to a retreat. He was gifted a recovery retreat that I put on with one of my colleagues. And he was gifted it by one of his students, right? Because we were like, we need people to come to this retreat that really need help, that can't afford it. So Mark was one of them. And he showed up and we did amino acids at our retreat. And he was like, where has this been? So then for him to meet you, and that's like playing it forward. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to plug that in and continue, please.
I jump in doing that. And this is so fun because I'm going to tie it back to what Patti was just saying. So I'd always believed in nutrition. I'd always studied nutrition and done nutrition, but so I jump into yoga therapy and I start doing the mindfulness program there too. So I become a mindfulness teacher and we have a mindfulness retreat. And at the mindfulness retreat, I'm in the kitchen and there happens to be these amino acids on the counter. And there happens to be this beautiful woman who's wearing a purple shawl and these beautiful glasses and has just this glow to her. And I say, hey, Patti. Hey, I've had an experience with amino acids. And she's like, oh, really? And I said, yeah, Mark Linton taught me all about it. And she's like, I taught Mark. I'm like, what? So after that,
how you and I met, just so our audience knows, that's how we met.
So Patti and I became wonderful friends, and we jump on the bandwagon together. But I have had just such these life-changing experiences with these healing modalities, and then became a functional nutritionist. But with my meditation practice too, I had still PTSD, right? So I still had PTSD from all this, and then went through another toxic relationship and had to use my meditation practice. I did it every single day for 1,000 days, because when you do something for 1,000 days, you become an expert at it. And it changed my brain. all these tools helped me to heal my brain, helped
Mm.
me to heal my trauma, helped me to heal my physical ailments, because I couldn't, I was so injured from my car accident. I had whiplash so severely, my left shoulder would pop out of place all the time.
Mm.
I couldn't hold things. I had to learn how to walk again because I had a sprained toe and it had thrown my whole gait off. My knee was sprained. I had a chest contusion. Like, I had all these physical ailments, and I was storing all my traumas in my body too. So the movement combined with everything helped me to get to where I'm at today. And where I'm at today is now helping others who are suffering and struggling with
Mm-hmm.
mental health, with physical ailments, with their addictions,
Mm-hmm.
and physical illnesses too, right?
Right.
Because functional nutrition is also about finding the root cause
Mm-hmm.
of the physical conditions.
Right. Yes.
So there's my story.
Wow. Thank you. That's so powerful. As you were talking about your body holding on to everything, just for any of our listeners, and many of you probably know about this book called The Body Keeps Score. Many therapists use this for people with trauma, going into the EMDR and clearing trauma. And so it does trap in our bodies. So getting the right support for trauma is really important for any of you listening. Yeah. So Jess, that was so beautiful, as hard as it was for you. And it's part of the hero's journey, right? We go through these really difficult, challenging experiences. And if we get through them, many have not gotten through them. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about suicide tonight. So a lot of folks didn't make it through because they just switch out. It's just like that switch out. Um, we're hoping to help prevent that a little bit and give you more information about what happens in the brain. So one of the things that does happen in the brain, and I can speak from experience, and I'm sorry, I keep leaning over to get
more
books. I have like all my books set up over here. So this is one of the pioneers. I'm going to share a little bit about the pioneers and then a little bit about my story. But I suffered from depression and anxiety, and also addiction. But this woman's story, she also wrote 7 Weeks to Sobriety, which is part of one of our training books, Depression Free Naturally. This was written by Joan Matthew Larson, who is has been one of the pioneers. She's no longer alive, but I wanted to share her story because it's so powerful. Oh yeah, these are both her books. Thank you for bringing it up. Of course it was on your shelf. So the 7 Weeks to Sobriety is part of the training. So I'm also a certified holistic health coach, have been since 2000. So that's 24 years. And then I became a nutrition recovery coach. So I'm going to share my story a little bit.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. And
with not sharing it.
I know. So, and I say my story because I'll often hear, well, just change your story. And I'm like, I am changing my story, but not the story that I experienced, because that experience has led me to be here now and to give hope to myself, my family, and others that I work with. So I graduated in 2000 from a school in New York called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. I was learning about nutrition, and it was always very interesting to me. And I know you shared about your dad. Well, my dad was not an alcoholic. I grew up with a holistic health chiropractor father, right, in the 60s. And, we would get adjustments. He would adjust my brothers when new babies, and we grew up with nutrition, back then. And that was different from everything I was seeing around me, because there was a lot of Wonder Bread had come out, and it was like, don't get in your kitchen. And my father and my mother cooked a lot. And so anyway, I grew up with that, and I didn't grow up with sugar. My dad was actually writing a book on sugar. So I had a trauma when I was 10. So I just want to bring the trauma piece in because that affects the brain. And there are many things that affect the brain. Trauma is one of them, which is why a lot of folks go to opiates, alcohol, for relief. So when I was 10, my father died in a car accident in front of our house, and all of a sudden everything switched. And I went from going on vacation the next day to my father passing as a 10-year-old. So that I went into like this, what we call in the brain nutrition field, this endorphin bubble, and that's called numbness. And it's a survival trait. So I went into, it was almost like I was out of my body, because I didn't know where to go. And everything was panicked in my house, you know? So I was like, so the first thing I went to was sugar, because we couldn't have it in my house. So now my father wasn't around to say, you know, there was no sugar. And I spent a lot of time at my aunt's house because a lot of us were sourced out. My mother was 38 years old with 6 children and just lost the love of her life, right? Tragically. Like, so all of a sudden it's like, and so I spent all this time at my aunt's house, and they had Cocoa Krispies and they had Captain Crunch. And I was like, woo, I'm going to have some of that. I'm going to have some more. So my brain went right. It was traumatized. So just when our brain is traumatized, whether it's from a physical injury like you had, Jess, but look, your injuries came before that too. So you were already traumatized by the emotional situation with your husband, right? So your brain was already there, and then you're in an accident. Mine was just psychological and losing someone. So that's the trauma. But as soon as that happens, your neurotransmitters downregulate.
Yep.
So they all go down, but at first your endorphins go up. That's why when you're in an accident, you may not feel it right away, because that's what we want. We have natural opiates. We have natural endorphins that help us feel good. And when they're fed, you feel good, and you don't want the alcohol or the heroin or whatever else we go to, or the pills to
We
raise.
don't want to numb. Yeah. And
You don't want to numb. You don't want to numb. So, anyway, I was in that bubble, went to sugar. And then when I got into high school, my first drink, I passed out, I was also a hypoglycemic alcoholic, and I was also pretty much chemically sensitive, but I didn't know that back then. But actually in the 7 weeks to sobriety, there's a whole assessment in there to look at, are you hypoglycemia? And hypoglycemia is basically low blood sugar.
well,
So I was eating, go ahead.
And 95% of alcoholics are hypoglycemic, which is why they're so irate and irritable. And that's where the dry drunk comes from too, right?
Correct. Hypoglycemia is really great. And we're going to give our listeners places to go to read articles, and we'll even put some of them on our site. I just sent someone a hypoglycemia article today as well. So I had that. So when I had a little bit and I remember the wine, it was my first drink. It was Ripple wine. I don't even know if they make that anymore. And I was a cheerleader, right? So I'm a cheerleader in high school. I'm a freshman in high school, and I pass out in the bathroom. Nobody else does. Everybody else had the same amount. I didn't hoard it. I just was like, okay, clonked, passed out halfway through the basketball game in the bathroom. So, I mean, I'm laughing now, but anyway, but that was my cue, right? But of course I didn't know that back then. And that happened often to me because alcohol never was my friend. So, anyway, I ended up, continuing to drink through college. I was really interested. I was so glad I was able to graduate from college. But I wasn't feeding my brain. So I had an underlying anxiety all the way through my childhood and then into college, because I was not feeding my brain. I wouldn't eat because I was also trying to lose weight. So I would not eat, and then we'd go drink, and then I'd come home and I'd eat my roommate's food, and I didn't even remember eating my roommate's food.
Wow.
So anyway, that's part of the hypoglycemia thing, but I'm not going to go into too much of it, except that I also went into weed as well too. So that was my other drug of choice, was marijuana. And of course, I get married and then I get pregnant, and I feel great during my pregnancies because I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not smoking weed. I'm not drinking. I'm feeling wonderful. So but I always kept going back because my brain was still going to that place of like, oh, well, okay. I was learning about, as I became a health coach, I was learning about, well, you've got to make sure you're not getting any pesticides in your foods. And I'm like, well, I'm going to make sure I don't have any pesticides in my weed either. And I'm going to make sure that my wine is organic. So people like chuckle like you at my story because they're like,
right?
What do you mean, right? Then they're
my body. I might as well do it with the best poison.
I am going to, and because I was learning about nutrition, I was like, well, I don't want to have a hangover, so I learned a lot about vitamin B's and all these other things. So anyway, I want to share this funny story though, because I think it's very interesting because I ended up coming out to Utah 18 years ago. And it was very, very challenging. I had to leave my 16-year-old in New York because I was at that place where I didn't want to be here anymore. And that was scary to me. I was suicidal in the sense of my thoughts were, I'm like, well, this is too painful to live here anymore. So how do I do this, right? Because I ended up going into, I didn't know about, there were no aminos. Nobody was talking about aminos when I was in my really dark state. My protein shake went to wine because I just had to stop the panic button, because that's what we go into. We go into the panic button, and it's like, and this is why, for those of you who are dealing with an addiction, whether it's alcohol or Coca-Cola, whatever it is, Mountain Dew. I mean, there's a lot of other addictions out there that we can't get control over. This is where the brain comes in. Yes, we need therapy. We need to work through our trauma, but we need to feed the brain. So the brain gets that uplifting in the neurotransmitters that we're not taught in school. We're not taught about this stuff. We're not taught about what we eat and what's affecting our brain. Unless you go to school for it. And I ended up going to school for it. So I ended up coming out here and getting sober. And when I was in a sober living house out here, I found this book.
Mood Cure by Julia.
The Mood Cure. And this is written by Julia Ross. And I thought, what's that all about? So I start reading it and I'm like, oh my. And it was about your neurotransmitters, amino acid therapy, food. And I was like, bing, 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 bing. The light bulbs went off. And I said, I've got to go get trained by her. So I went out to her clinic out in San Francisco and did her training. And then I studied with her, met Christina Veselak, who we're going to bring up some of her information. Christina Veselak is a
amazing, wonderful,
amazing genius. Yeah. One of my favorite avatars in the world. Oh my goodness. She is a mental health and addiction nutritionist and a psychotherapist. So she merges those two. I met her at a conference and then we connected, and she started the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition. I'm one of the trainers on there. So I just kept learning about it. And I thought, wow, what was the real ticket for me was I started changing what I was eating and feeding my brain. And all of a sudden that anxiety that I had on and off most of my life started going away. And I didn't think that was possible. And that was part of the reason I smoked weed and I drank. I wanted that anxiety just to go down, and it did, until it didn't anymore. Yeah. And that's what we know about constant use, that it's helping temporarily and then it shuts down and then you need more. That's addiction.
And so you were depleted then in serotonin, because serotonin is where the suicide comes.
Yes.
For you, it was depleted.
And anxiety.
Yeah.
But I was also depleted in endorphins, because when you've had trauma, the endorphins, you're just sensitive to everything, emotions, your body, your nervous system. So the endorphins, and we're going to do another whole talk on aminos. This is kind of our first talk on mental health, nutrition, and addiction, but we're going to further these talks because we feel it's really important in our society right now.
Yeah.
And we're going to get, so we'll get into that. But
it's interesting because, you said your nervous system. And so your whole nervous system was completely dysregulated, and you were no longer like living in this place of thriving and flourishing. You were now in this fight or flight because everything, and same for me, everything that I'd known was pulled out from under us. Right. Like, and that's what happens. And so it's not just about we're whole, like it's layers upon layers upon layers. So it's not just one part of us that's dysregulated when a trauma happens. It's so much of us, and the parallel and the linear part of the brain disconnect when we experience a trauma. And so the timeline is the linear part of it, and then the parallel part is the actual event that happened, right? And so these become disconnected. They're not integrated. And when they're not integrated, then when we experience triggers, it's as if that trauma is happening again, because our body and our nervous system are not recognizing that it's a brand new experience and a brand new situation. And so that's where you have to have that integration coming back to bring the parallel and the linear part of the brain together too, to also heal from some of that PTSD and that trauma.
Absolutely.
And then there's the whole neuroinflammation. If you're not eating correctly, you're not eating right, you're causing inflammation in your body and in your brain. And so that's where it's so important that you have to have that good nutrition, because when your brain is inflamed, you have microglia, and microglia go out and they clean up all the bad cells. But when there's inflammation, they get confused and they start eating your good, healthy brain cells as well. So it's
I know but it's okay. Let's talk about the microglia.
Anyway, so there's all these things that are happening. Our body's smart, right? Our body's really smart, and it wants us to come back to homeostasis.
Yes.
And it turns on these responses. We get to work with them, but we are so afraid to work with these feelings and these emotions that we turn to the substance, because it's so freaking uncomfortable to reside in that state of dysregulation.
Yes.
We reach for these substances to try and regulate us, but we also have this innate intelligence in our body that wants us to return to homeostasis, that if we can work with it and allow it to be, we can get back there naturally if we support it too. And the aminos is one of the supports that you're talking about, right? It's a nutrition is another support.
Well, food. Yeah. So Yep. No, I like that, because I love what you said about homeostasis. So basically we're always seeking that, right? We're always seeking that, whether we're using substances or not. We're seeking the chat's popping up. So I'm getting distracted. I'm a little distracted. So we're seeking that balance point always. And yes, we're like, wait, I have to go into the trauma, and I need to go in and get therapy around that stuff, around things. But if your brain is not fed, and we're talking about protein, good fats, and complex carbs, which is vegetables, grains, we need all three of those to feed our brain. It's like fuel for your car. It's not going to go unless you put fuel in it. It's the same thing with us. We need fuel to think right, to feel right. And that's why I love her book that she called it The Mood Cure, because the mood cure is all about nutrition. So that's the connection, right? The connection is, oh, wow, if I don't get protein in and good fats in, and I don't get to feed my serotonin, which is one of our neurotransmitters that helps us feel calm, that helps relieve anxiety, right? It also panic attacks and suicide is the bottom of that. So we wanted to talk about that because, yes, suicide is also trauma-based, of course. and we need to look at our environment and our trauma and get out of an abusive relationship, but we all and look at the trauma that we experience, but we also have to feed the brain simultaneously. Because if we're just treating the psychological part, we still have that, oh, I need something, I can't do it.
Well, and your body is still in that fight or flight place too, because
Correct.
something's missing. Like it's trying really hard to help you heal, but if that's missing, then you're still in that fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
So you need the food. Yeah, we need the fuel to be able to get over some of these really heavy things.
Yes, for sure. And the aminos, I want to just talk a little bit more about aminos for folks. We're not going to be giving out any suggestions or protocols on here, just because this is not a place for that. But if you're interested in help, you can go to the Wellness Crusaders, our website, and contact either Jess or I. And we're going to bring up some, we're also going to have some contacts for you to get help and support, because it is important that you get help and support. If you are suicidal, then you need to probably go to the ER as well too. We don't want anyone to be in that place. But what we're talking more about is prevention. So prevention is feeding the brain. And one of our colleagues, here it is, wrote this book.
Feed Your Brain, Change Your Life.
Yes. And she also did the training for the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition. And she is actually a hypnotherapist. So she came to one of our trainings actually here in Salt Lake in 2017. We did an in-person training, and she wasn't, as we know, this is a family situation. Mental health and addiction affects the whole family. You just expressed that, Jess, and my children and family were affected by what happened with me. So it's not an isolated incident. It affects our families. It was her daughter. So she came, and now, she brings amino acids into all her, she actually has her own amino acids now that she created. So she brings amino acid therapy and nutrition into her hypnotherapy sessions as well too. So this is real. Feed your brain, change your life. Because like you said, Jess, earlier, when you fed your brain those aminos, there was that bridge. There was that hope bridge. It's like, oh, I'm not in that panic. And you were telling yourself in the mirror you could do it. So you were also giving your body that message, and then you were feeding your brain and your brain too. So that was clicking in at the same time, right? So it's like, okay, take some aminos, eat, go to yoga, go to your counselor. Like these are the tools. And if you're not getting the brain piece in, you may not get there fully. And we want people to get there fully. This isn't about surviving. This is about thriving. And I know on these shows, we talk a lot about the healing the body, and we've had a lot of great shows on pesticides and things like that. And we're going to talk more about clean food too on another show. But we want to get the cleanest food we can as best as we can. And sometimes that might be just making a protein shake, just to get it in. One of the things that happens with serotonin, I want to bring up, since we were talking about anxiety and depression, serotonin is created in the gut and the intestines. So a lot of times people are like, oh, but I can't eat, right? And that's, one of the questions we ask people right away is, what did you eat today? And if they're like, nothing, we're like, okay, that's where we start, right? So getting even in some bone broth or like a protein shake, something into, so the brain is starting to get fed again, and you're able to come back up to that more balanced place. So if it's not fed, could be going into that panic. So if anybody's experiencing that, we can certainly suggest having a protein shake.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually had a couple of friends today that reached out to me that were suicidal. They're going through some really heavy things in their life. Wow. And it's the very first thing I said to them. I was like, have you eaten yet? Have you eaten? And neither one of them had eaten, and by the time they start ingesting food, and I'm like, get something to eat right now, like get something to eat. And they start eating, and immediately they start to shift. Yes. Their mood starts to shift.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to note that serotonin is made in the gut.
Right.
And serotonin is directly linked to anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts.
Yes. OCD.
OCD, ruminating thoughts, those
That can't turn it off.
yeah, those you're having all those conversations in your head, but then meditation can also help with those things too, because
Yes.
meditation is going to rewire the brain. It is going to help to rewire those firing patterns. And that's another thing too, is we start to get into those depressed states, and now we're creating new firing patterns as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're getting into that depressed state. This is how we're dealing with it. This is the new pattern of going to the drug or the substance or whatever it is, the sugar, the candy, the weed, whatever it is, right? And now we're creating these pathways around. That's how
New neural pathways.
that's how we're coping, right?
I'm so glad mine are new.
Yep. Daniel Siegel says neurons that wire together fire together. Because what happens is you start to create. So if you think about an electric cord, right? Inside of there is a bunch of little tiny wires. Well, this coating on the outside is like the myelin sheath in our neurons. So they start to develop this myelin sheath around them and start to fire together. So that is another reason why it is so hard for people to break free from these habits that they've created, or these addictions, because of the firing patterns, right? But the more that you practice sobriety, the more that you practice eating, the more that you practice taking your supplements or doing healthy things, doing yoga, doing meditation, whatever it is, the more you're creating new pathways that are now firing and wiring together. And that's going to replace those old habits, right? It's going to replace them. And now this is going to become automatic. So now when you're experiencing a stressor, instead of reaching for that drug or that substance, now you're going to your yoga, or you're going to your meditation, or you're going to
your GABA.
Yeah, your GABA, whatever it is, it's just automatic. Like it's just a new automatic response. And that falls away. But it goes away. So I hope that you guys are all taking notes, because we're going to open up for Q&A soon. And if you have any questions, you're going to get to call in and talk to us and ask us.
I love that. I love the wire analogy. Did you just have that there?
I actually was wanting to use it, but yeah, it was just here.
Okay. Wow, great.
Oh, I need to talk about that.
How spontaneous. How spontaneous. I want to talk just a little bit too about, since we're talking neurotransmitters, and, when you have enough serotonin, you are flexible. And for anyone, one of the things that I also experienced besides anxiety was obsessive compulsive. So that's like, making sure I have order. And I know that also stems from my trauma as a 10-year-old, because what happened, I basically lost my mom after my dad died at 10, right? And so she never kept the house up again. And that was upsetting to me. I remember walking home from school when I was 11 years old and wondering if my house was going to be messy.
Wow.
Like that was a panic to me, because I'd go in and there would be stuff everywhere. And I go into this panic because I was out of control, right? My mom was checked out. So I also have, I have that obsessive compulsive things. And, I like to, I remember my sister used to say, "Oh, I know you've been over because my silverware is organized." You've been to my house. And I'm like, yeah, the spoons go there, the knives go there. So when we have enough serotonin, and I know when I have enough serotonin, I'm more flexible. I'll let things stay out, or, I'm not as in that place where I have to have everything in a place, right? It's like, okay, I can release that, because you have more emotional flexibility. You're more flexible with life, so that, oh, okay, well, that's changing. Oh, okay. Like I was like, wow, I just handled that so well. Like, I'm like, oh, they canceled. That's okay. Like,
yeah,
I'm going on that trip now. Oh, that's okay. Something else is going to come up.
And it helps improve your self-esteem. So I like how you just said, oh, I handle myself so well, because that's your self-esteem being impacted by serotonin being regulated as well.
Right. And one of the things we do as coaches trained by the academy is we do an amino acid assessment. So we look at all the different neurotransmitters, the 5 major neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, which is actually the cats, which is dopamine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. We look at your GABA. GABA is our relaxer that helps us feel relaxed to deal with stress. And we look at your endorphins, our natural opiates, and then we also look at blood sugar. Those are the 5 main ones. And then we assess it according to your symptoms. So we're not looking at a blood test or a urine test. So anybody can do it. And that's actually what we have found, trained by Julia and Christina, and the others before them. That is the best way to assess, where you're at, and then what aminos work best for you. Also, if you're on medication, we're trained to look at that as well too, because it's important that all that's looked at as well too. But the other thing about serotonin is self-confidence that you said, Jess. So people, and I remember when I was in early sobriety, I was like, oh my gosh, I like damaged my brain. And for sure I did. And I know Lori Gagan, who's one of the Crusaders, does a lot with brain scans, and which is so cool because you can actually see from the aiming clinic what and I teach here in Salt Lake City. So I'll show my students a scan of their brain after being on meth, and they're like, oh, but then I'll show them the scan of when they've repaired their brain, when they've fed their brain, when they've gotten therapy, when they've done their meditation, and it's changed. Mm-hmm. So we get to re-heal our brain no matter what's happened over here. That's part of our lifestyle. We start making changes and our brain starts changing too. But when I was in early recovery, I was like, wow, I couldn't even put a sentence together. And I had no confidence. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get up and speak at a meeting. And I was like, oh. So as the brain heals, that serotonin gets fed and you're like, I can show up.
I can do this.
I can do this. It allows you to actually feel that because it's working on your mood too.
Yep.
As well.
So I would like to, there's a couple of like little techniques that I would like to show people who are experiencing anxiety attacks too. But I love what you said. So people who don't have the immediate availability to run out and, make an appointment with us right away to do this, but somebody who's experiencing an anxiety attack right now,
right?
What can they do? Like, what can they do? And so you can engage your senses. So you can start to engage your 5 senses, right? One of the best techniques that has helped so many of my clients is to just start rubbing your hands together. Like this. You just start rubbing your hands together. So you're rubbing your hands together and you're feeling that. You're noticing that. You're feeling the heat. You're feeling the texture. And you're just really paying attention to what's going on with your hand, right? And then you can start to go like this, just gently rubbing your face. Just gently, because what this is doing is this is actually stimulating the parasympathetic response to calm down. And so you're just doing this, focusing and breathing, right? And then you're going to bring it to your arms and you're going to start to just go down. So just gently rubbing down your arms. Yep. And then you go back. If you're still feeling that anxiety, then you just start over, rubbing your hands.
I love that. Wow, that's so simple.
And then touching your face. And then your arms. Right. So just super calming. Like it's just this calming. We need touch. We need touch. And you can touch yourself. So when you're having those moments, like the self-soothing techniques are very important. And then when you're calm, now you can say, okay, I need to eat.
Right.
I need some food now. Yeah.
Right.
Because sometimes just that panic attack of like thinking, oh my gosh, I have to eat. And you look in the cupboard and it seems so overwhelming, right? If you're in that panic attack, you're not going to think about eating.
Right.
But if you can just start going like this.
I love that. I love that. I'd like to add one too that came up. So I love that calming. It's so perfect. And then going and getting some protein, an egg, a piece of turkey,
nut butter, one of the
Nut butter, almond butter, peanut butter, anything. And even if you have to just dip it in a spoon, well, dip it in a spoon.
Dip a spoon in it.
Spoon in the butter.
Put the spoon in it.
My New York accent. But I want to share one more before we go to Q&A. And this one is actually a Qigong sound healing for releasing fear out of the body. Okay, so you can also just stomp, you can shake, like actually to get it out, and walk. I mean, I was a runner, actually I wasn't a runner. I mean, I wanted to run away from stuff. Basically, I wasn't a runner. I didn't have running shoes, but I was like, I got to get out of here. So go for a walk, right? Move, do that. But this is a sound healing. And it might seem a little strange, but we're going to do it. And it's the sound eh. So it's EH is the sound. It's a Qigong. Qigong is a healing energy practice. And this helps release fear out of the body. Okay. So it's just a simple sound. We'll do about 10 of them. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, go. So that comes from an ancient Qigong. There's actually a whole series of different sounds you can do that I teach some of my students too, because that actually gets it out of the body quickly. And there's other breaths we could share with you too, but the main thing is that you just want to get out of the panic attack, and that fear response and that fight or flight.
Yeah. Well, and you'd said that it helps, like it shakes it up in the body. So one of the responses that we have with trauma, which is one of our natural body responses, is that shaking. We get shaking, right? They took some polar bears and they were like, why do animals not have trauma? Like, why do they not have it the way that we humans have it? And they exposed these polar bears to trauma. And what they noticed was that the polar bears were immediately shaking, like their body would go into these shakes. And that's the body's way of letting it go. So it's not being stored within us. But we are taught, oh, stop shaking. I got to stop shaking. I got to stop shaking. But if we just allow that shaking and we work with that shaking, like we're moving that trauma out of it. It's not going to settle within us.
Right. So. And also just moving back and forth. This is another one that our beloved Christina does. It's a tapping. You cross your arms in front. Just going back and forth and tapping.
Well, because you're crossing, so this is the left and right hemispheres. You're now doing the integration of the left and the right hemisphere.
Right.
Because you're doing that cross body movement. So it's important that you're crossing the arms, that you're not going this direction.
Yes.
Because you have to cross that brain, the brain hemisphere.
Yes.
Yep. The colostrum, isn't that what it's called?
I don't know. I know Laurie would probably know.
Let's see. I have a book here. I have the human body book. I can look at that.
Well, we want to just, we want to open it up. We're going to keep chatting, but we'd love to open up to any of your questions or concerns. This is the call-in number 385-899-2134. And we have our lovely DJ Flyboy.
DJ Flyboy.
Bringing in the calls. And the crossing is part of the EMDR. It's that if anyone's ever experienced that type of therapy, it's really powerful. And in fact, Christina, who we're talking about, in fact, I wonder if DJ Flyboy, could you just pull up the Academy site for folks, if you have that handy? Because I think I'd like for folks to see that are on here. So this is the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition. This is a place, this is a training. There's level 1 and level 2 for people who want to be trained as nutrition recovery coaches, but you don't even have be certified as a coach, but even if you just want to learn about it, it's fascinating and wonderful. Can you scroll down a little bit to that video? Is there a video on this one? Well, here's a video that you can also watch. We're not going to watch it now, but this is the introduction to the course. And a lot of what we talk about and are trained about is the biochemical, psychological, and spiritual. Yeah, that's great. So anyway, if anyone's interested in looking more about that, and the other one I'd love to bring up for people till we get some call-ins is the Academy. Eating Protein Saves Lives. That's another one that was started by the Academy. And there's a lot of information on this website that you can also access as well. This is a great video right here. Yeah, so it's eatingproteinsaveslives.org. And you can watch this video here. Um, um, do we want to? I don't think. Do we want to watch it, Jess, now or?
Yeah, let's watch it.
Let's watch it until we get some call-ins. Thanks.
Now is the time to tell everyone the good news about a simple idea that really has an impact. Healthy, protein-rich foods reduce cravings.
There's a lack of education about how nutrition affects the brain and the role that it plays in substance use disorders.
Eating protein can help prevent overdose deaths because it helps prevent cravings and addictive cycles.
We want everyone to know that feeding their brain, eating the proteins that the brain needs to function well, this will save thousands of lives. My name is Christina Veselot, and my career is helping individuals and families who struggle with drugs, alcohol, and other substance use disorders.
I'm Chris Engen. I'm a nutrition consultant. I'm board certified in holistic nutrition, and I'm also a certified
We're having some technical difficulty.
recovery nutrition coach.
Hey, I'm Julia Wicker. I'm a certified health coach and a nutrition and wellness educator for drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers.
My name's Lyle Freed, and I've been working in the mental health and substance use treatment industry for about 20 years. I'm currently the director of Freedom Now Clinic in Boynton Beach, Florida.
This campaign is putting information about brain nutrition on billboards in communities that are devastated by addiction and overdose deaths.
Billboard advertising is expensive, but it works. We need your support to share this solution with as many people as possible.
A billboard campaign about eating protein to address substance use disorders will be extremely helpful because it's a far-reaching issue that affects so many people.
Feeding the recovering brain helps people to fully participate in all other aspects of their recovery journey, such as meetings and therapy.
Brain nutrition is a huge aspect of drug and alcohol recovery and personal health that few people know about.
Eating protein is extremely helpful in the battle against addiction. It's one of the most beneficial but largely ignored areas of drug and alcohol recovery.
If we changed attitudes about addiction and nutrition, we could positively impact the crisis of addiction and opioid overdose deaths.
This is a huge problem with an easy solution.
Please spread the word about brain nutrition, especially when it comes to drug and alcohol recovery.
This is the time for change, to nourish our brains with protein.
Help us spread the word about brain nutrition. Donate now, and we'll build this campaign together, and soon we can share our message with the entire world.
Eating protein saves lives.
Eating protein saves lives.
Eating protein saves lives.
Eating protein saves lives.
Love it.
Love it. Thank you so much.
So this is both Pati and I are certified through the Academy.
And that was Christina on there.
And
So.
yep, I watched both of us smile as she said.
I know. We're just
like, woo, we know
we love her.
we're trained by her.
Okay. So do we have any call-ins?
Yes, looks like we do have a caller. Are you two ready?
Yes.
All right, let me bring them up on in. Sarah, you are live with the Wellness Crusaders with Jessica Endicott and Patty Reese. What question do you have for them today?
Well, hello there. And I first want to just say thank you for sharing your story. It's very heroic and admirable on doing that because I think that most people tend to want to sweep it underneath the carpet because they either want to say, no, it's not my kid, or it's not my spouse, or it's not me.
Mm.
So thank you for sharing that. So for people like me who don't eat as much protein from red meats, some chicken, a little bit of ground turkey, is there a way to achieve the amount of protein to create a healthier brain so that my cravings dissipate in some of my own addiction?
Yes, indeed. I mean, are you a vegetarian, Sarah?
No, I just really like red meat as much, and I usually only have a couple of ounces of like chicken or turkey
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at a meal.
Yes, I've been working with a woman who is a vegetarian, and she's actually blood type O. We do a little bit about personalized nutrition. So we're working with that because that's what she's choosing and her body feels better. So protein shakes are definitely one way to do that. Getting the right protein shake that will work for you. Also bringing in some allies like the hemp seeds on nut butter, using nutritional yeast in some of your soups and your egg salads. If you do eggs, I don't know if you do eggs or not. Tempeh, you do? Okay. Yeah, I think just bringing in some of the other allies in terms of, I mean, I love hemp just because hemp is got so much. It's got a good amount of protein. I mean, I think it's a half a cup gives you about 15 grams of protein. You'd probably have to research that a little bit, but you can add it to your nut butter. I would also add in actually more sprouts. I mean, sprouts do have some protein in them too, so that's another way to bump up the nutritional value. Broccoli, sprouts, microgreens. Let's see, rice and beans. Combining that together, the right rice. Grains. Quinoa is a great grain. I like to recommend that one a lot because it's higher in protein. The other thing I would say too, and I'll let Jess add to this too, is if you're going to use nuts and grains, soak them, because when you soak them, a lot of our ancestors soak them, it actually clears off the phytic acid that can be a little harmful to the gut, but it also bumps up the protein content. So you're getting more protein in like walnuts and almonds, all of those nuts, when you soak them and then dehydrate them, because you do want to make sure they're dehydrated, whether you have a dehydrator or you could put them in your oven at a low temp, then the protein content gets bumped up. So that's another thing. And mix nutritional yeast into a lot of stuff too, because that has a high amino acid profile. You still need calories. It's not gonna navigate the calories very well. But anything else you might want to add to that, Jess?
No, I love that because I wanted you to share about soaking the nuts because I think that's really important. That was something I didn't know. I like to carry little nut butter packets. I just get them from Sprouts or Whole Foods, and they're these little nut butter packets, and I carry them on the go. And I just grab them as soon as like I'm feeling hungry or feeling a change in my mood, right?
Yeah.
Those, or even jerky sticks. They make turkey jerkies and things like that. But I think we need 60 grams at least of protein a day.
Yes. About half your body weight, Sarah, in grams of protein.
Okay.
The other thing, when Jess was talking about traveling, we have, my husband make this trail mix of like some dates and some cherries and walnuts that have been soaked and hazelnuts, pumpkin seeds. And boy, that's a lifesaver. Like, because I could, it was just the other day where I was like crashing and there came the nuts. And so, having that available to travel around with too. So you're not, especially if we're busy or we're on the road, just having a good trail mix ready to go and having it in your bag for yourself, as well as like Jess
Yeah, that
was.
seems pretty simple.
Mhm.
That seems simple. How long do I soak them for?
Well, soaking nuts is varied. Walnuts probably need about 8 hours. We just usually do it overnight. Some of the like almonds and hazelnuts, those are a thicker nut, so they usually need 2 soakings. So you probably want to do one soaking for about 6 or 8 hours and then dump it and add some more water in. And here's a ticket for that. You add a little sea salt into the soaking water. So you soak it and then you empty that out and fill it up again and add a little more for the walnut, not for walnuts or pumpkin seeds. We even do our pumpkin seeds, actually. We soak them as well too. Some of the smaller seeds, like you don't have to soak hemp seeds. You do have to soak chia seeds. That's another omega-3 seed that you might want to bring in. You can just put them in water. I usually keep a jar of chia seeds in our refrigerator. It lasts for about a week, 10 days. You can just smell it. If it doesn't smell.
I didn't know this. I didn't know you were supposed to soak chia seeds. So.
Oh yeah, you soak a chia. You soak chia. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's
okay.
Yeah. You can just, the consistency you want it kind of liquidy, because the chia can get thick. And you can, once it's soaked in the fridge, then you can add that into your protein shake too. If you don't mind the consistency to me doesn't bother me. It's like tapioca pudding. You can also make pudding from it. I like to do a lot of puddings with the chia seeds, but yeah, you do want to soak it. It's more digestible. And then flax seeds, of course, there's a little protein in there, but you're getting in that good omega-3 fat too. The flax seeds you actually want ground up. So one of the things we like to do is keep a little bit of each of the nuts ground up in our fridge. So then if we're having like oatmeal or quinoa or even, a grain in the morning, you can just add that in. So whenever we have a grain, we want to add in some of the nuts to add more protein and also to add more omega fat in it as well too. So we usually keep a little bit of those in our fridge if we can.
Okay, well that's good information. And then once I start adding this, how long, if I'm really being diligent about it, how long do you think it would take me or anybody else to start feeling a little bit better?
Well, I think
like 14 days. I mean, would I see a difference? Would I see it on day 1?
That's really individualized, Sarah. It really depends on how you are absorbing, right? So the way your body absorbs, that's your metabolism, which is obviously an important part, because the metabolism is what's turning our food into our cells and our neurotransmitters. So it really depends on how you're absorbing. But if your digestion's been pretty good, and the one thing I would add in to help your digestion is to look at your blood type, because that's a way to at least get in foods that may not be so that may not be inflammatory. So that's the whole concept behind the blood type, is that there's certain beans as well that don't work as well for like blood type O's. So you'd want to look at the app. There's a great app and there's lots of information on Eat Right for Your Type. That would be just helpful, because you'll be getting in foods that your body can actually digest. And if you're doing more beans and rice, you want to get in the beans and rice that your body goes, oh yeah, I like that. I'm not reacting to that.
Right. I think that's important to note too, is that Pati, this is something that we can help them with too on an individual basis too. Mm-hmm. So that's more of an individualized question and an individualized approach too. And so you can reach out to us at info.
How do I get a hold of you again?
Yeah, so you can send us an email, info@thewellnesscrusaders.com.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Sarah. Happy eating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Sarah. And please make sure to check in next week on Thursday at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and you have a wonderful day. All right, ladies, that's all the callers we have. So I'll let you guys go back to talking. I'll let you know when we have another caller.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to, is anything popping up for you, Jess, right now?
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to talk about some of the things that can cause mental health disorders.
Ah, okay.
So, because I don't think it's just as simple as like people, right?
Right.
And then I want to offer like some support places where people can go. I mean, we offered those websites, but 988 is also another great number for suicide. You can get somebody on the phone immediately too.
Right.
Patti and I are also here, and Lori is also another great coach too. So
Yes.
me and Patti and Lori Gagan are also incredible, and we're all skilled in this arena, right? So, but 988 is a great center for people who do not like to do AA meetings or things like that. That just doesn't resonate with you. There's some online support groups, but AA is also incredible. Like there's so many people at AA that are incredible.
Yes.
And NA, and there's online ones too, right, Patti? And Patti can speak more on that because she's been part of that community. So
yes.
You want to talk about that, Patti?
Yeah, but did you say 988?
988.
Okay,
Yeah.
could you just talk a little bit more about that, what that is for folks?
Yeah, so that is available help 24/7. There is somebody on the other end waiting to answer that phone call and assist you and talk with you. And if they need to send out a response team, they can do that as well. Like if you are that into that deep, dark place, there is somebody that can come and assist you. But it is like there are support groups out there. You're not alone. Like you're not alone in this. And 20 minutes, like at 20 minutes, if you can distract yourself or you can do something different for 20 minutes, that's all it takes for you to shift out of that mood too. So if that means going and grabbing protein and eating some protein, or doing some breath work, or calling a friend, or reaching out, or reading a book or something, taking a shower, like doing some things to shift, like start thinking about what are your go-tos that make you feel better? What are your little pick-me-ups? You know, what is your little pick-me-up that helps you? If it's journaling and finding one thing that you're grateful for in that day, and that's going to help shift your mood, go to that. But when you start to get into these low places, I think it's also important to recognize, hey, I might have not eaten today.
Yes.
This moment will pass. I do have people that love and care about me.
Yes.
I can give this 20 minutes.
Yes.
I can call 988. I can reach out to Patti, Jessica, or Lori. Right? There's
no.
Anything you want to add to that, Patti?
Yeah, well, we just got a message from Leighton that there's a caller that doesn't want to talk, which I honor. And if protein, the question is, and so I want us to both address this, is can protein help with suicide? Does it work too? Yes, it does. So because what you're doing is when you eat protein, and again, you may not want to. I know I didn't want to eat when I was in that place of panic at that level. But if somebody was telling me, if somebody had told me, hey, Patti, why don't you just sit down and we'll take a little protein, I would have done that. So yes, it can help. And that's why we were talking about having some nuts handy or some meat handy. If you're doing meat, have some hard-boiled eggs, have something where you can just sit and eat and then just breathe through it and just eat and just breathe. And then the panic will leave. So yes, it can help. So I honor you for doing that. And this is about taking care of our bodies now. So thank you for that. And I do believe we have 2 callers, Jess. So.
All right, let me bring the first one in. Terry, you are live with the Wellness Crusaders. What question do you have for Jessica and Patti today?
Hi, I was just wondering, I'd like to know a little bit more about how it works when you sit down and give someone an amino acid assessment. You said that you work with symptoms.
Yeah.
Jess?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Terry. So what that looks like is it's actually we can do an online session or an in-person. I prefer in-person. I know Patty prefers in-person because we do an assessment and you answer it 0 through 10 on how you're feeling, what your moods are. And then depending on how you're scoring in those areas, like I actually have.
Do you have one available?
I do have my chart right here.
Okay.
So it actually looks like this. I know that our screen is backwards, but it looks like this. So we go through these questions, figure out which ones you're depleted in, and then we can actually do some trialing of the aminos right there. And within 20 minutes, you're going to start to notice a difference.
Yeah.
And then we'll give you some samples, or you can purchase them right then to take with you. But we'll give you some samples to try it out before you make that commitment. And if we have to make adjustments, we'll communicate with you openly for the next couple of days and watch you really closely, and then we'll make adjustments as we need to.
Right. And the other thing, Terry, is that we also will check in to see if you're on a medication. We take a little bit of a history too, so we know what you're coming in with. And then again, yeah, we do like to trial them with you right there if that works. But we also want to know where you're coming from, if you're on a medication or, where you are. And the assessment helps us do that as well, too. So it's really very non-threatening, but it's really magical, too. There's a story with, I talked earlier about Julia Ross, who wrote The Mood Cure. And a lot of the assessment that we use is based on her work. She talked about this years ago about one of her clients who came in, and the son I think he was about 9. It was running around the room and angry and just and she's like, oh, okay. So she gave him a small little bit, I think 50 milligrams. And we're not suggesting this for anybody out there, but she gave him a small amount of 5-HTP, which works on panic attacks and a little bit of rage too. We forgot to bring that up, that low serotonin also can be rage and just wanting to jump out of your skin. You just are like, ugh. And within just 5 minutes, he started slowing down his running, and then he sat down in the chair and he smiled. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that can happen, So if the right aminos are connected with the person, it can happen like that. So,
well, and you have to remember there is a precaution with 5-HTP. There are some precautions. So yes, we do have to. Yeah, you really should work with a coach who knows what the precautions are.
For sure.
Okay, and so you trial them right there if you can, if you do it in person.
Yeah, if you do it in person. If not, then we do a lot of Zoom calls too. So for other folks too, we can't trial anything, obviously, if we're doing a long distance call, but we work with people, long distance as well too. We make other suggestions for that as well.
All right. Wow, that sounds great. I'll definitely look into that.
The info at thewellnesscrusaders.com, Terry. If you send us an email, we can talk more about it.
We'd love to support you, Terry.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling in.
Yep. Thank you for calling, Terry. Make sure to check in again next week at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. All right, ladies, let me bring in the next caller. All right, Pam, you are live with the Wellness Crusaders. What question do you have for Jessica and Patty today?
Hi, Patty. Hi, Jessica.
Hi,
Pam.
Pam.
How are you?
Good. How are you, hon?
Hi,
Good. Your video's not moving right now for me, so I'm having a little bit of time, but I'm glad to be on. And Patty, your share about it being an emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I've been sick for probably, what would we say, 3 or 4 years. Sick all my life, but really sick. couldn't stay awake. Everything I ate was turned into inflammation or hystematic or whatever. And not having an appetite. I lost 10 pounds. Things aren't going well, but you really gave me at least a direction to look. Like, I was looking for trauma, like, that was physical. That I had a concussion, or that I had, you know, whatever. And so trauma, when you explained how that actually shuts down all of these neuronets, I could kind of go through exactly when it started and what was going on around me, because it was like a grouping of a whole bunch of things. I was coming out of Arizona and having spent a lot of time, like a couple of years, with my brothers and sister, and I didn't realize that I was constantly in trauma until I came back to Salt Lake. So thank you for sharing your own personal stories. That really made a difference for me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Say what?
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing yours too with
us.
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, Pam.
You guys are kind of off and on. I could probably go out on my front porch and see if it's me. But I'm really doing so much protein with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Protein, really conscious of it. Staying away from any gluten-y food, staying away from really a ton of grain, or looking at foods that have that stuff that you were talking about that needs to be soaked off with vegetables and nuts. Like, a good time for me, right about before I started just eating a lot of protein, was one of those packets at 7-Eleven of peanuts with M&Ms in it. It was like a big old glass of wine. You know,
oh yeah,
serious addiction. But if I was to, since this topic is amino acids, I kind of feel like, since they're considered a building block to protein, that enhanced my ability to absorb this conscious effort to put more protein in, that my body is getting ready to be how do I make it more bioavailable, I guess is my question. And can you do that as well as straightening out the amino acids that you actually need?
Jess, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so yes, you can. That's why it's so important to add the protein back, because the protein is the building block for the amino acids. And to create more bioavailability, we also have to make sure that our inflammation is reduced, right?
Right.
So when we make sure that the inflammation is reduced, that can be eliminating foods that are inflammatory. And some of those inflammatory foods, like you were just mentioning, is gluten. And another one is casein. And casein is found inside of milk products, because there is actually a chemical. It's actually the beta-morphine casein, which is an amino acid in milk. But the beta-morphine casein will penetrate the blood-brain barrier and actually attach to the opiate receptors in the brain. And so when it does that, it causes inflammation, which is why we have this addiction to milk products. But if you switch and you're using A2 milk, now A2 comes from a different cow, and it does not have the beta-morphine casein in it. So that's going to also help to reduce inflammation. So using sourdough bread instead of gluten bread, or even gluten-free bread, is going to be better than using the white breads or the whole grain breads, right? Because they have the gluten in them. So also working with a coach too, to do an allergy sensitivity and find out what other foods you may be sensitive to. because if you're eating foods that are causing inflammation, I mean, that's gonna affect the bioavailability of your body being able to absorb and grab the nutrients from the foods that you're eating, because now it's competing with that inflammation.
Right. And if there's some,
going on.
Mhm. I was also going to mention too, there's some, go ahead, Pam.
I was listening to you.
Oh, okay. I was also going to mention, possible leaky gut, right? So we want to make sure that the gut biome is healed, right? So that's another thing. And I would mention, and you probably have already been doing this in the past, is bone broth. If you're okay eating, drinking bone broth, because that really heals the gut lining. And then you can get those nutrients in. And that's something we recommend, again, with people who are healing the gut and trying to absorb more, because, it'd be nice to just go get an IV with amino acids, right? But that's not affordable and not really doable, but we can do it through the bone broth. The other thing I was going to suggest as well is, with the aminos, if you want to do like a total amino, you could even open them up and put them under your tongue so they're sublingual. So now that's not calories. So you still need to get the calories in, but you could open them up so that Jess is are you gonna do it right now?
Yeah, so you can I'm not gonna take this one because it's L-tyrosine and then I'll be up all night. But
okay,
you just
but you can open it
and then just dump it in.
And dump it under your tongue and let it, they don't taste too bad, and then let it absorb that way. So you're getting it into the bloodstream quicker, right? Without having to go in through the digestive system. So that's another idea, with a little bit of water to help that. But you may benefit from a total amino, so you're getting more of those in to your body.
Okay. And that wouldn't cause any harm. Like if before I get my appointment, then it would be a good idea to have like a kind of all of them in a capsule and start with a little bit, opening the capsules up like you're suggesting.
Yes.
You're saying to me? Okay,
Yeah, I'm saying that's okay. But I think it'd be better to have an appointment first if you can, just to go over your chart.
Right. And you two know this, I know this, is buying supplements is, I want it to be, I want my money to be on things that are valuable, especially to me. And I am drinking, there is not a sign that my crock pot doesn't have bone marrow soup in it. It is constant.
Well, good for you.
Drinking, 4 cups of bone marrow soup on a daily basis. So, like a coffee cup size. So thank you for saying that. And, I can just feel like when I'm eating and the digestive process is moving through my stomach, that there used to be like sharp pain. Like it was hurting. I can almost tell you which areas of my tract that were damaged. Because it's hit my veins. It's in my blood. This is going places it doesn't belong. So I think that, but these amino acids, I can remember you talking a lot to me about taking them, and me just not being well enough to hear you. So I'm really looking forward to, first off, this. I'm hoping that you're doing this weekly. We are once a week, or
it's not. Yeah, we're on every week from 4 o'clock to 6, about 6. But it's not just us. There's 2 other crusaders that come on and talk as well too. But all of us have a lot to share about health and also the health of our soil. which is the root of our food. So we invite you back, and keep going. Can't you're doing a great job healing yourself, and it's wonderful to hear you and connect with you.
I'm just delighted you're doing what you're doing. We really need it. It's been an incredible 2 or 3 years now that we're hearing and exposed to just from being on the planet is very, very hard for us to be in this awakening time.
Yeah.
I know what we're up to. It's just a little struggle. All right, I love you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
To you too. Okay, blessings to you.
Yep, thank you for calling in, Pam, and please make sure to check in next week at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and you have a wonderful week.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah, so I love what you said about the bone broth. Bone broth is so healing. It's so, and your bone broth is so delicious, Patti.
No, I'm stocked up. I think I'm going to bring Cam some bone broth. So we just did a turkey, so I'm ready to go make a delivery. I think pretty soon here. I wondered if we could just, before we close and see if we have any more callers, I think what you were bringing up about other causes of why we become addicted and why our mental health is off. I think it's important to bring up because we learn about this in our training. And one of them is other illnesses going on, right? So because when we have an illness or an infection, our neurotransmitters are downregulated, right? So we feel worse. We're like, oh, right. And then we go to our substance. We want to change how we're feeling, right? So I want to know if you want to, should we bring up some other things too?
Well, yeah. Well, and I think it's important too. Like, what about pyroluria?
Right.
Pyroluria is a lack of zinc, or your body's inability. Tell me more about that one. I'm like getting lost on my words. I'm stumbling.
No, I know. Pyroluria. I couldn't even say it for all these years that I've known about it. I'm like, pyroluria. So pyroluria is a condition that is the red blood cells, and I may not get this perfectly biochemically described, but you don't make enough zinc and B6. Yeah. So what happens is the pyroluria in your red blood cells pulls it out. So in fact, Mark, who you were talking about, when he came to our retreat, we discovered he had pyroluria, and that was like a breakthrough for him, because when you don't have enough zinc, which is a crucial mineral, that's another thing. If you're low in minerals that we get from our vegetables, and you can also get it through a supplement, but we want mostly food, if you're low in zinc or B6, you feel crazy. Your brain goes, rah! So there is this condition. In fact, I actually have a book here that it was discovered by Carl Pfeiffer. Well, where is it now? Oh, here it is. So this is a book called Nutrition and Mental Illness. Now this book
right here too.
Yeah. So this book was written, the copyright is 1987. So who is Carl Pfeiffer? Carl Pfeiffer was a medical doctor who did orthomolecular approach to mental health, right? So he was looking at conditions that were leading to people having mental health issues. One of them was pyroluria. And he talks about it in this book, right? So pyroluria, again, it's some genetic. I mean, people generally have it for life if they have it, and they need to just take more zinc and B6. And you can get tested for it, but there's also a questionnaire. There's a pyroluria questionnaire that's really helpful for people. And if you start taking extra zinc and B6, your brain feels better because your brain is being fed what's being pulled out. And if you don't have zinc, you do feel your brain is offline, right? Yeah. So those are some of the things as well to look at. And again, this comes back to feeding our brain and making sure that we're getting in protein and that we're absorbing.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. so while you're talking about that too, I just wanted to, like, our topic today is love your brain.
Yes.
It's love your brain. And our brains are these beautiful, wonderful, magical, crazy, complex things, but they're doing the best that they can. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that. And so when we start to get into those dark modes and like, I've even had some clients say, my brain is so effed up, it's so
Yeah.
it doesn't work, it's offline. And
Yeah.
and that's so disheartening to hear, but yet
Yeah.
that's the reality that people are facing. Like, people are really feeling that way.
No
And-
question. I felt that way.
And why is it effed up? Like, why is it effed up? Well, there's reasons why, and that's what we're here to help you discover and help you understand, is that you don't have to be that way. And Pati said earlier that she healed her brain.
Yes.
I've healed my brain. It's possible. Like, it is possible. Our brain is neuroplastic. And when we give our body, when we work with it and we listen to it and we follow what it needs,
yes,
we can repair it. We can
absolutely.
rebuild it. And so your destiny or your diagnosis is not your destiny.
Right on.
I want to say that again. Your diagnosis is not your destiny. You can shift it.
Yes.
You can shift your diagnosis. Your diagnosis is just symptoms. It's just this little thing, this little label that allows us to understand what the symptoms are. So it's categorizing all of your symptoms and it's putting them in this box. And it's putting them in this box. So now you understand what it is you have so that you can work with it.
Right.
You can understand it and you can follow the symptoms and you can get to the root cause and you can start to shift it.
Right.
You can shift away from that diagnosis. So there's parasites could be an underlying issue. Mold exposure could be an underlying issue. There could be some genetic things that are an underlying issue, like the pylorrhea is a genetic issue. There's things that we know and we understand from a deep level because we've studied the crap out of this. We've lived through some of it. We've helped friends, we've helped families, we've helped clients through this.
Right.
Environmental factors, food factors, what else? Home situations, relationships, what are your relationships like? Are your relationships causing trauma for you?
It could be putting you in a stress state, which is shutting everything down.
Yeah. Yeah, chemical, emotional, and physical factors all play a part in what's going on. And environmental is so huge. Like your home environment, your outside environment, your friend environment, what you're watching on TV, what you're listening to on the radio, like what gossip can even affect your brain and rewire your brain in a negative way. And then we also release chemicals when we experience traumas, and we start to become addicted to those chemicals too. So there's a lot that could be going on. And Pati and I and Lori, who's not on our show today, but she will be here next week with Dr. Fleming's. We're all so highly skilled and trained in this arena. And you're not alone. We're here to offer you hope.
Yes. Thank you for that, Jessica. And I want to bring up this book. I thought this is called The Hacking of the American Mind. And I love this. It's Dr. Lustig, the science behind the corporate takeover of our bodies and brains. So I want to bring this in because I want to share with our listeners that a lot of people don't know that what they're eating, the pesticides in the foods, the herbicides, that's why we're doing a lot with that, affect our brains. We have toxic overload. The brain's going, well, wait a minute, what is that? I don't know what that is. So I'm just going to store it as fat, or I'm going to go to an organ. So we're encouraging eating clean as best as you can. And people are like, well, I just can't afford that. That's not true. Junk food costs a lot of money. You start adding up all the money you're spending on the junk food, and then what it's doing to your brain. So our encouragement is to start slowly weaning off of that, because the fact is, I just have another book here. I'm like a book talk show. So
And she has all of this inside of that mind.
it's all in here now.
All that information downloaded in here.
I downloaded it. Ding, ding, ding. But this is real, right? This was from a conference I went to, and that's real. Like, we don't realize what is in the food. And so here a lot of folks are like, oh, I'm leaving behind alcohol, or I'm leaving behind heroin or weed. And then I watch them at the center I'm working at now. And it's like, wow. And then they're pulling in Diet Cokes and processed foods and glyphosate and other things. And I'm like, oh. So slow and steady, start weaning off the junk food. And the reason we can't stop junk food is because it's addictive. The food industry knows all about that. So they're not dialed in for our health. And that's part of what the hacking of the American mind is, because basically Dr. Lustig is a pediatrician, and he kept having all these young people come in with one disease after the next. And he's like, I'm going to do all the genetic testing on this. So he did. Wasn't genetics at all. It was lifestyle. So we get to bring hope to you that we slowly can start going, oh, I'm just going to go get real food. Go to the farmer's market, look for the organic food, get your protein in there, know where it's coming from. If you're eating protein from, regular raised animals, they're loaded with chemicals, and then we get that. And I want to say something about that though, too, because I know a lot of people are on budgets. You can still bless your food. And that would be an encouragement spiritually, to bless your food, but do the best that you can to eat organically and eat the clean food, because that's slowly starting to clean out your body and your brain. And start loving yourself. Start going, thank you for my body, and thank you for the healing that's happening, because we're talking to our bodies every time we say something to our body. So my encouragement is, say, thank you, body, for healing, especially if you're in a place where you don't feel well. Thank you for my healing. Thank you for my healing. And then just go eat a little more real food.
Absolutely. I love that, because I do that all the time too. Thank you for my healing. And I've had my own struggles these last couple of years with my health, and I've had to go back to that. Thank you for my healing. Thank you for my healing. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to tell your body.
Yes.
I have the cutest little video from my granddaughter. I wish that I would have added it on here, but she's 4 years old. And at the time she's saying, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I feel great, and I can do hard things. And then she goes,
she did. That was great. I remember that video. I love it. I actually like doing that too. Right? So that is very, very sweet.
If you're feeling like poo, why not do that? It's gonna change. Like, you're gonna start laughing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So let's hurry and let's finish, because we're ending.
Yeah.
Let's finish this with telling resources again.
Okay.
988 protein saves
eating protein saves lives.com.
Amino, I always get messed up on this.
Aminoacidtherapy.com is the academy that we've been talking about.
Aminoacidtherapy.com. There is AA 988. Us, info at wellnesscrusaders.com. And then there's also, for those who want to have a paid coach, a paid sober coach, there's also the remote recovery support group too, which is a beautiful, amazing thing. So remote
there it is in our these are all going to be, just so folks know that this is all recorded. You can go to our site and hear this again. And then all of these will be on our site as well too. These that we've just mentioned, all of these resources that we just mentioned. And we'll put a few more in there. There's Recovery 2.0. They have online meetings too that are not AA based, but they're 12 steps. They're just a different slant. But get support. Make sure you reach out to us or to some of these resources to be supported.
Yep. And yeah, we'll put them on our Facebook page, our Instagram. It will be on all of our channels. So that's the Wellness Crusaders. You can find the Wellness Crusaders on Instagram, Facebook, wellnesscrusaders.com, YouTube channel. So look for us. Check us out.
Yes, please do. And we thank you all for joining us today. We will continue this conversation because we're here again to empower you to make changes for yourself and to inspire others around you, because we can only really take care of us. Codependence is actually another addiction that we haven't mentioned, but codependence is real too. So the best thing we can do for others that we love is let them find their way and show them the way by what we do. So please take care of yourself, love your brain, love your body, and
if you don't love your brain right now, let us help you learn how to love it.
Right on. There you go. Okay. Well, I think
everyone.
I think we're complete for today. We look forward to seeing you next week on the show. And please, Main Street Media, is it .org?
Utah, Main Street Media, Utah.com. Spread the word. Tell everybody about our show. Next week is Dr. Fleming and Lori. So it'll be a really good interview. I think they're talking about COVID.
Okay, good. Yeah.
They're talking about like the aftermath of COVID, like how it affects the body and stuff. So
and what we can do to support that.
Yep.
Nice, beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. Much love.
Okay, bye all. Thank you. Blessings. Happy eating. Happy loving your brain.
Go eat some protein.
Go eat some protein. Drink some water.
Bye.
Okay.